Hello. As you know, there are four elements in astrology. The zodiac sign Aries is fire, followed by Taurus, which is earth, followed by Gemini, which is air, followed by Cancer, which is water, and then on to Leo, which is fire again. So we know that there are these four elements. And a lot of ideas in astrology are handed down from ancient times, and the historians have figured out approximately what happened, that in Babylonia there were more than 12 signs, and then gradually they settled on 12 signs of 30 degrees. The details of exactly how the ancient people put this together are not known. We have a very rough idea of the sequence of things. But what we know today is we know why there are four elements. Okay, we actually know why they are there. And the reason that there are four elements is based on something that we can call sacred geometry. We have to give a label to this. And so let's call it sacred geometry, but we know it in detail, not just a vague philosophical and inspired idea. But we know exactly how this happens, and I'm going to explain it to you. It's going to take a little bit of time, so there's going to be a series of videos. I don't know how many it'll require, and I like to keep the videos down to about a half hour or so. So, we'll see how many it takes, but let's start with the first part of this. And I'm going to take some time to explain this because I want you to really get the intuition and feeling of it as well as just the formula, so to speak. So let's build this from the ground up. Why are there four elements in astrology? Well, to appreciate where these four elements come from, let's first get to some fundamentals about astrology. In astrology, we emphasize 12 signs. There aren't 13 signs, 14 signs, 15 signs. Actually, in ancient Babylonia, they started off with more signs. They had because they related them to the stars, and they thought maybe there were 17. Gradually, they settled on 12, and this became the established doctrine. And in astrology, we often say, as above, so below. So what's going on up in the sky is reflected in our lives. But our lives are not based strictly on 12. So to me, there's a little bit of a curious disconnect there. Why is the sky so strongly 12, but life isn't? And this is our first hint, our first step. By the way, you might see some light is flickering over there. Don't worry about it. Um, so this is our first hint. I'm going to build this from the ground up. So the first intuition that leads to this discovery is to question that maybe some of this ancient heritage of ideas is not 100% complete. Maybe there's more than 12 signs. For some astrologers, this is almost like sacrilege. Like, how dare you challenge, the doctrine? There are 12 signs. Okay, but that's okay. I'm going to challenge things. Question everything. So when we look at nature, it's not based on 12. And it's like a little bit of a meditative exercise. Just think about it. Think about the sunflower here on the left. We now know that the Fibonacci sequence, which I'll talk more about later, is involved. There's actually a kind of mathematics and geometry behind the sunflower that is now understood. And this is not just like woo-woo alternative thinking. This is like, standard fundamental science that we understand. We modern people understand that there's a geometry and a mathematics behind the sunflower. And I'm calling this geometry a sacred geometry. Maybe modern scientists don't like to put the word sacred in there, but we use this term sacred geometry because there's something so beautiful and it underlies the manifest life. And the scientists agree with this. There's this Fibonacci sequence. They like to say, well, it's the most efficient way to do it, and it's just a mathematical formula. I don't know why they like to dry everything out and take the inspiration out of it, but this is so beautiful and fascinating that there's this Fibonacci sequence, and I'll explain later what the Fibonacci sequence is, because believe it or not, the Fibonacci sequence is related to the four elements. Wow. How do you get from that? I'm going to take you through this. It's fascinating. So anyway, we now know that there's this geometry and basic arithmetic behind the pattern of the sunflower. And when you look around nature and you see spider webs and peacock feathers and all kinds of things, how the heck does nature do this? And it's not just a passive process of adaptation of the fittest. There is a design, a geometry behind life. This is getting to be a more and more popular idea in science, and it also creates the zodiac and the four elements, amazingly, and in a very direct, simple, and straightforward way. Okay, well, just for fun, here's some more amazing patterns. You know, when you look at it, it really is mind-boggling. Look at this patterns on this butterfly, and of course the flowers. Look how intricately, beautifully organized this is. Um, so it's just amazing. It's just for fun. We'll take a moment and just what do they say? Smell the roses. Let's just enjoy the beauty of nature for a while. Just all the different forms. And what we're going to see is that there's a way of understanding this and relating it to astrology and relating it to zodiacs, and it explains a lot of details, one of which is the four elements. So, I said at the beginning of this that we know why there are four elements. Well, no, maybe that's a slight exaggeration, but let me show you what I mean by no. It's really a theory, um, but this theory is so convincing, so compelling, and there's no other theory even close to it in explaining why there's a zodiac at all and why there are four elements. So I'm using the word no because it's such a much more powerful and convincing explanation for why there's a zodiac and why there are four elements. So let's review some things here about what we mean by theory, just briefly. So I'm quoting here from a website, livescience.com. The University of California, Berkeley defines a theory as a broad, natural explanation for a wide range of phenomena. This is what I'm going to present to you. A theory of why there's a zodiac and the details of how the elements are created. So what I'm going to present to you is a broad, natural explanation for a wide range of phenomena, an explanation of why a lot of things exist in astrology. You know, in Vedic astrology, there are the nakshatras. This theory explains why there are nakshatras. It explains why there's a zodiac. It explains why there are four elements within the zodiac. It explains why there are antisha, why there is gender, why there's masculine and feminine signs. It explains a broad range of things. This is what theories do. Theories, just continuing on our slide here, theories are concise, coherent, systematic, predictive, and broadly applicable. That's what I'm going to show you. It's concise, coherent, systematic, predictive, and broadly applicable, often integrating and generalizing many hypotheses. And a great theory is so simple and clear and explains so many things. It's just fabulous. And I'm going to show you the theory that explains many things. I've actually shown this theory already in some videos, and here I'm going to show it in specifically in regards to the four elements. The power of this theory and the importance of it has gotten largely ignored. People just don't seem to quite fathom what we're getting at here, this breakthrough understanding in the mystery of what astrology is. And that's one of the reasons I decided, maybe I should just have people subscribe to this. Just giving it away seems to go over people's heads or something. They're not fully getting how important this is. Okay, now let me just read a little bit more. Any scientific theory must be based on a careful and rational examination of the facts. Facts and theories are two different things, right? It's kind of obvious, but I want to take a little time in this video to really feel the ideas, not just, connect the logic of it, but feel the beauty of nature, the complexity of astrology, and that there is this simple, coherent, systematic theory that pulls it all together. Just, get a sense of where I'm coming from. When I present these ideas, I'm coming from the same way of thinking as the University of California at Berkeley when they present this. This is how we're thinking, or how I'm thinking about it. So there are facts, and then the theories help us put those facts into a relationship to each other. Actually, they explain it better here. Facts and theories are two different things. In the scientific method, there is a clear distinction between facts, which can be observed and or measured, and theories, which are scientific explanations and interpretations of the facts. So what I'm presenting in this video is theory. In the videos I just made on some of the research on extroversion, introversion, those are facts. The facts are that people who score very high in extroversion have certain planetary configurations at the time they are born. That will become a fact as that research is replicated. And then we say, look, we've seen it, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. Then we declare it as a fact. It's just a fact. We keep seeing it over and over again. So as those facts develop, it's nice to have theories. Now I'm going to show you some of the theory behind some of the things in astrology. Okay, just one more slide on this. I'm not going to belabor this too much, but just one more little thing. We'll start heading on into what this theory is that explains why there are zodiac signs and specifically where the four elements come from. But just one more little statement. Jaime Tanner, a professor of biology at Marlborough College, explained that a scientific theory is the framework for observations and facts. I'm taking a little time to explain this because what I'm going to present you is a framework. It's a theory, a framework. And theories may change, or the way that they are interpreted may change, but the facts themselves don't change. I love this sentence coming up. Tanner likens theories to a basket in which scientists keep facts and observations that they find. Okay, I'm ready to show you the basket. Enough introduction. But I'm going to show you the basket in which all these specific ideas and concepts and observations fit into. The shape of that basket may change as the scientists learn more and include more facts. Okay. So at the bottom here I say, fact, there are shapes in nature as shown in the image above. A theory can provide a framework for understanding how nature forms these shapes. Okay, so we have a beautiful, elegant, and powerful theory for why there are zodiac signs. This theory is much more elegant and powerful than any other theory. Most astrologers and non-astrologers have not given much attention to this theory, but eventually they will. I have decided to make this information available to subscribers of these videos. So now I'm going to explain where the four elements come from: fire, earth, air, and water, what they really are, and how they function according to this theory. Here's the theory. As I mentioned, there's a sacred geometry behind nature from which these beautiful forms are born. Now, this idea that there's a sacred geometry behind nature is becoming more popular in the sciences as well. Scientists say that space is a real thing, even though we cannot understand space except as things in space. So the human mind says, okay, here's a cup, you know, whatever, the various things around me here. Here's a glass, okay. There are things everywhere. Your computer, blah blah blah, trees, houses, things. We don't have, as humans, a sense of space as anything other than the things which occupy space. But Einstein proposed about 100 years ago that there's a time-space continuum, this four-dimensional reality, three dimensions of space, height, width, and depth, and a dimension of time that are actually tightly integrated together. And it's like a fabric in which reality exists. So somehow there's a thing called space that exists. The mathematical formulas that predict the behavior of things suggest that there's something called space. And more recently, scientists are suggesting that this space, it's like similar to the idea of an ether or an astral world, this like thing behind our reality that we live in has structures in it. And I have an entire video called A New Theoretical Framework for Astrology. And I quote the statements from the scientists that there are structures in space. Well, these structures in space we can call sacred geometry. That there's this geometry behind the reality we live in. And because it's behind the reality we live in and supports it and is a kind of source for what we have, we can call it sacred, which implies that it's more fundamental and it implies kind of an emotional relationship to it, that we're, in awe of it or appreciate it. In any case, I think it's a good term. There's a sacred geometry. And again, this idea of a sacred geometry, which has been an idea of mystics for thousands of years, is now becoming a fundamental idea in modern science. They don't call it sacred geometry, but we can call it that. No reason why we can't. And also in the more alternative sciences, like the work of Rupert Sheldrake, in other words, hasn't become accepted as standard ideas within academia, but is respected and appreciated and considered. People like Rupert Sheldrake propose that there's something called a morphic field, this life field. So there's a lot of ideas and variations of ideas implying that there's some force field, similar to the force fields in physics, with these structures, and that is behind the forms we see and shapes and patterns in nature. And very simply, zodiac signs are a structure in space. Zodiac signs are not constellations and stars. They are not streams of energy coming from physical things. So when scientists say, oh, the zodiac signs have moved from where the constellations are, that has really nothing to do with it. They are structures in space. The zodiac signs are more fundamental, in a sense, than those things. They're in space itself. This is kind of abstract, but these same abstractions are the ideas used by physicists today. Most of quantum theory, relativity theory, is difficult for human minds to understand, but they work. So astrology, as people have been saying, is a sacred science, something that's describing something more fundamental. It's describing structures in space. This is what zodiac signs are. Now, that's a nice philosophical idea. You can like it or not like it or reject it, or it's speculation. But what's not speculation are the Fibonacci numbers. And The Fibonacci numbers, as you probably know, is this sequence of numbers 0, 1, and it's extremely simple. You just take two numbers and add them and get the next number. 0 plus 1 is 1, and now we have 1, 1. 1 plus 1 is 2. Take 1 plus 2 is 3. 2 plus 3 is 5. 3 plus 5 is 8. And you just keep doing that. And this sequence of Fibonacci numbers is involved in creating the patterns in sunflowers and seashells and all kinds of things. Most of you are familiar with this already. Now, the next thing with Fibonacci numbers is you can put them in a rhythm, in a beat. And rhythms and beats and frequencies and vibration are fundamental to life, and sound and light are all based on frequencies, and you can think of frequencies as related to rhythms, and we put the Fibonacci numbers, this fundamental growth process, in a rhythm. How do we do it? In a very simple way. It's called a modulus function. When we get to some number, we can pick any number, just like you can have music in 3/4 time, like a waltz, or 4/4, or whatever. You can make any rhythm you want. Let's just arbitrarily pick the number 6. And what it means is when you go above 5, you subtract 6. That's all it is. You just subtract some number, 6. So we have 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. When we get to 8, we subtract 6 and we have 2. And I put it in bold here. So here are the Fibonacci numbers, and below it are the Fibonacci numbers in a rhythm of 6 we call modulus. Here's the bottom line. The theory is that Fibonacci numbers in modulus functions create the zodiac. That's where they come from. And there's a lot more to it. We have ideas about why Fibonacci numbers exist and how. There's more to it, but that's the basic idea. You got it? There are Fibonacci numbers. They're involved in that sunflower right there. Fibonacci numbers are behind the shape of that sunflower and many other things in nature. And you can put Fibonacci numbers in a rhythm called a modulus function, and when you do that and you put it around a circle, it creates a zodiac. I'm going to show you. And it creates the elements. So that's what does it. Behind all the myths, and Aries is the pioneer, and Taurus is the gardener, and Gemini is, a minstrel, and there's all these mythic stories. Those mythic stories exist, but those mythic stories are born out of something else. They are born out of fundamental frequencies. There's a song. There are as a vibration behind those mythic stories from which they're born. Carl Jung, the genius who developed all these details of understanding the power of myth and stories in our lives, when he died, his dream, his vision, was to connect psychology to science. He was not happy just to understand that myth and our archetypal stories are fundamental forces in the human psyche. There's always why. And how does it connect to quantum theory, relativity theory? There must be a relationship. Carl Jung was not satisfied with just stopping there. He wanted to bring it all together. So interestingly, astrologers who are archetypally oriented, they can be satisfied, but the person who is behind this was not satisfied with that as a final answer. I think curious people are never satisfied with final answers. There's always more. And we have now fulfilled the dream of Carl Jung, at least partially. There's always more. But we are now understanding that connection that Jung dreamed must exist. His intuition told him everything's connected. Everything is interrelated. You can't have quantum physics here and relativity theory here and archetypal psychology here as separate little worlds. His intuition was it doesn't seem right. Intuition is always the guiding force. Now we have found his intuition was correct. There's a connection. And as often happens, the connection's amazingly simple. It's like, why didn't we see this before? And it requires interdisciplinary thought. You have to have facility in a lot of different areas, then you start to see it. And this is what we've done. We are fulfilling the dream of Carl Jung and creating this beautiful, elegant theory. And it's this simple. Let me just tell you one more thing. Everything is spinning. The subatomic particles have three properties, one of which is spin. The Earth is spinning. The Earth is revolving around the sun, a form of spin. The sun is revolving around the galactic center, which is another form of spin. You look at the galaxy and you see these spinning spirals. I don't know why God or the Force or whatever you want to call it loves spin, but it does. There's spin, and all we suggest is that you take this number sequence of organic growth. There it is. There's the sunflower. You take that sequence of organic growth and you hypothesize that it's connected to spin. That's all we've done. We've taken the fundamental facts of life, that spin is operating at every level. Excuse me. It's operating with the little electrons and protons and the components of them. There's spin. It's not necessarily a physical spin, but there's what we call angular momentum. There's something related to circular movement, and sometimes it's not even a physical movement, but that's what happens at the subatomic level. It's hard to describe. And you know what we discover here? It's actually not a physical movement. It's exactly the same as the quantum theory. There's a sense of spin, of interconnectedness, because what happens is when you take this sequence of numbers, that's growth, that is very closely connected to life forms, it's also closely connected to the golden ratio. Johannes Kepler discovered this, that the Fibonacci number sequence, the ratio of 144 to 89, and then you go to the next number, as the sequence goes on and on and on, it gets closer and closer to the golden ratio. It's just sort of a magical thing that happens. So there again, you have the golden ratio, this proportion of life is built also into the Fibonacci numbers. And then all you do is you take the Fibonacci numbers, you put them into a rhythm, into a beat. And how do you do it? You just subtract out a number. If you want a beat of 6, you just subtract out 6. And that beat of Fibonacci numbers is going around the subatomic particles. It's the spin of the Earth. It's there. It's connected. That's the theory. And a lot of theories in physics are crazier and wilder than this, okay? The idea of the theory is if it can explain a lot of things, and especially if it's simple and consistent and clear, this is your basket, as you know, I quoted from that scientist. It's your basket, it's your way of holding all these facts together. And that's what's done in science all the time. Oftentimes this basket, this theory, is just a pure inspiration, just an idea that just pops in your head. and it happens to fit everything together. And this theory is built on other things we understand. And it explains it all. And it explains it in such detail. And it helps us better understand how the elements work. This is the exciting part. We'll get to in a later video in this sequence. I'm already at a half hour and I barely introduced this. I'm taking a long time. I hope that's okay because I want you to feel the whole thing. So I've used up the whole first. I'm at a half hour already, just giving you the background feeling for this. And now we're ready to start jumping in to how this happens. Let me tell you one more thing and then we'll break here and then we'll continue with the next video in this sequence. With the next video, we're going to start understanding these Pisano periods. Pisano period is what I just explained to you. Let me show it to you. This sequence of numbers right here, 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 2, 1, 3, 4, 1, 5, 0, 5, 5. This sequence is Pisano period 6. Okay, you're learning some fancy mathematical language. You now know what Pisano period 6 is. It's Fibonacci numbers in modulus 6. You got it? Let that sink in. And this is a good stopping point for our first in this sequence. And in the next video in this sequence, I'm going to jump right into the Pisano periods. And what we're going to see in the next video in this sequence is that Pisano period 6, the one I just showed you, also 9, 12, 10, 5, and 8, all of these create the zodiac. Believe it or not, all we're going to do is take these Pisano period numbers and put them around a circle and they create a zodiac. You might say, well, how the heck can 0, 1, 1, David, you're telling me that 0, 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 2 doesn't look like a zodiac to me. It looks like a scrambled mix of numbers. But something beautiful happens when you put them around a circle. And believe it or not, it creates a zodiac and it creates the elements. And the way it creates the elements is amazing. And it actually tells us how the elements operate and what they really do. So we will start in the next video going through the Pisano periods and how they create the zodiac with a special emphasis on how they create the 4 elements. And probably take at least 3 videos. By the third video or so in this series of videos on the 4 elements, we'll get a better understanding of what water is. It's not just emotional. There's something else going on. And a better understanding of what fire is and earth and air. We're going to get a better, air is not just mental. There's something else going on. And we're going to get a better understanding of what the elements actually are. So you got to kind of be patient to work through the ideas. I mean, I hope you find these ideas that lead up to this interesting, but eventually, by about the third video or so, it's going to give us a better understanding of what the elements are, and it really makes sense. Okay, all right, well, that's enough for the first in this sequence of videos. I'm now at almost 34 minutes. We'll stop here, and the next one we'll pick up with this slide of the Pisano periods, and we'll see how they create the zodiac and how they create the elements. Okay, my friends, I'll see you at the next video. God bless. Namaste.